The following presentation of City Cinematheque is made possible, in part, by support from the American Scandinavian Foundation and the Consulate General of Sweden in New York. Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today it's our pleasure to show you the 1995 Swedish film, Autumn in Paradise, directed by Richard Hobert. No less an authority on Swedish film than Ingmar Bergman himself has called this film a masterpiece. And it's the kind of film that certainly recalls in a number of its features Bergman's own chamber family dramas, but also to many of us it may also recall some of the more recent films, say, of our own Woody Allen. I'll let you decide about that once you have this opportunity to see this extraordinary film. After today's screening, it's our pleasure to welcome here as our guest Claes Jernaeus, a member of the Consulate General of Sweden and an expert on Swedish film. Now, take this opportunity to go to Autumn in Paradise. Welcome back to City Cinematheque. I hope you've enjoyed this opportunity to see what I think is really a remarkable film from the mid-1990s. And I hope you've had a chance perhaps to think about where you're going to get some apple cider or bite into an apple, because there are many virtues of this film, and certainly one of them is apples. But there's a lot more to talk about in this film rather than apples. It's artistic achievement, its context, etc. And it's a pleasure to welcome today to City Cinematheque someone who can help us with all of that. Today we have with us Claes Jernaeus. Claes is a member of the Consulate General of Sweden here in New York. He's the charge or counselor for press and cultural affairs, and he cut his teeth as a young journalist, as a film critic. Pleasure to have you here, Claes.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Let's start with some general things first, and then we'll move more and more towards the film itself. This is a film that comes from Sweden in the 1990s. I think it's a sad feature of the state of world film distribution that it's not a film that's very well known in the United States, if known at all. In fact, I think I'm not going to go out on a limb if I say the state of Swedish filmmaking is not something that's very well known in the United States at this particular moment. So most generally speaking, what's going on in Swedish film now, and how does this film fit in with those trends? And who's Richard Hobert, the director?
What's going on now, that we've had a tremendous wave of young directors coming now the last 5, 6, 7 years in Sweden. And they've done a number of films. I would say that of the 30 films made every year in Sweden, about 10 of them are made by what you would call veterans, like Jan Troell or Liv Ullmann or Christine Olofsson and others. And then the other 20 would be by young people making their first, second, or even third film now. And they are in their 30s or perhaps in their 40s, but very young to be film directors making full-length features.
Okay, let me ask how the system works in two ways. Let's say I'm growing up in Stockholm or Uppsala, and I love world cinema, I love Swedish cinema, and are there now particular paths by which people are choosing the career? I mean, certainly in the United States, if you said 35 years ago I'm going to film school, that was an odd thing to say in the United States. If you say I'm going to go to film school now, you'd say it's almost, well, who isn't going to film school now? How are people becoming directors in terms of training, and then we'll talk about how these films actually get made.
It used to be in the 60s and 70s when the Film Institute was very new and spearheading the Swedish film industry, that the film schools only had 12 or 14 students, 2 for sound, 2 for cinematography, and 2 for directing and so forth. Now there are still some, but there are much more, there are many more opportunities to have film education. But the new wave of video also has created an entire new generation. This is probably the generation coming now who have started doing films on videotape, starting with small television programs. And they've started to think in images and pictures rather than in a literary way. And you can see that also that the films they do rarely start in a book. There are very few films now that have an origin in a book, although they write their own scripts, but it's a story that is written for the actual film.
Now, that's a very interesting comment, because one of the charges laid against a very great director, Ingmar Bergman, but those people who do not like Bergman, I'm not one of those, I'm a Bergman admirer, is that Bergman is a great, but he's a literary director. Sure, he wrote a lot of his own scripts, but it seems far more like literature. Or another great Swedish film, the double film, The Emigrants in the New Land by Jan Troell, again drawn from important Swedish literature. So that's a kind of past. I mean, there's been a lot of literary baggage coming with certain aspects of Swedish cinema. So this is very interesting, this direction which is a direction I think most directors around the world would like to would like to take.
And even a baggage from the theater. Bergman's background was very much in theater and has continued to be in theater. You know, what he's doing now is a few plays in the Dramaten, but no more films. And that was also the case for Vilgot Sjöman in theater and writing books. But of the new generation, very few books and very few people coming from the actual theater.
Okay.
So there are visual minds who now are producing and directing film in Sweden.
Well, let's talk about this relationship, which is perhaps more intense in Europe than it is in the United States, between the television industries and the and film. Are a lot of these people passing through television as well, getting their training or doing their first works there?
Yes, and that is also another background. We used to have only public television in Sweden. Swedish Television used to have a very strong commitment to film, as well as to theater and literature and drama and whatever. So they started to co-produce films in Sweden a number of years ago, and the deal was that it was first shown in cinemas, in public theaters, and then after 3 or 4 years they were shown on television as part of the deal. And that has continued, but what we now have, we have independent television companies, and that has increased the opportunities to do film, and that's probably one of the reasons we have a number of young directors now. So Television 4 and Television, some of the other channels too, are helping out to produce film that then eventually will be shown in their stations.
So how are these filmmakers themselves, like Hobert, I mean, we're going to get back to Hobert in this film specifically, but how are they being received in Swedish society? I mean, this is a smaller country. There is a limited home audience. I mean, just simply statistically limited. And there is a general complaint around the world that even when certain native cinemas are produced, they can't compete with largely the Hollywood studio mechanisms of marketing, of fame, etc. So how's this generation doing in terms of critical reputation and the box office?
It's interesting because we've had a different tradition. We are used to see films from Italy and Spain and France, and we grew up with Truffaut and Godard and Fellini and so forth, and also the not so artistic films. So we have a tradition. But the American film, the Hollywood tradition, is very, very strong in Sweden. I believe that the Scandinavian market is perhaps the second market for American film now. And the last 3 or 4 years, the scene has been that of the 10 most the top 10 in the box office, 2 have been Swedish, 1 has been British, and the other 7 have been American.
Well, that's a near third of the top 10,
Yes.
drawn from the non-Hollywood studio, because of course American independent film is itself a part of the international art cinema tradition, so that usually doesn't count.
When it then comes to the two that every year tend to make it have mostly been comedies,
Okay.
and very few of the new young directors are doing comedies, but the ones who do tend to succeed. One exception has been a success that came, I believe, 2 years ago and was opened here in New York a couple of months ago, Show Me Love,
Right.
by Lucas Moodysson. Not really a comedy, a story about young kids in the age of 15, 16, and it had tremendous success because a number of young Swedes just identified with these kids. Their rootlessness, their ambitions, their problems in school, their fascination with gadgets of them, cell phones and television and whatever, and their identity, what they should be, identity as teenagers and individuals. And so it was not a comedy, but a very strong drama between teenagers that became an absolute success and has a lot of prizes in Berlin Festival and many other festivals. So it's a great success.
And I'm going to make the assumption that frequently rolls over into at least a modest success in the neighboring Scandinavian countries that share features of culture or language.
Yes, we always see films from Denmark and Finland and Norway as well, and this one has been shown too.
Right. All right. Well, let's narrow ourselves down a little bit to Hobert and to the way in which his work has been received. I mentioned in the introduction to this show that Ingmar Bergman has himself called the film we've just seen, Autumn in Paradise, a masterpiece. I think some of our viewers can view this film in relationship to some of the kinds of films that, say, Woody Allen has made in recent years, like Husbands and Wives, that sort of thing. What has Hobert's reputation been? Is he someone in the now front rank that people, if you're Swedish and you follow Swedish film, you know who he is?
I would say that, first of all, he has a very unique situation. Imagine to be promised to make a deal to be able to make 7 films in a row. Never happened before.
Wow.
And they were all connected through that theme of
Seven
deadly sins. And he's made the 7. The last one, which I think is called Birthday, will be shown at the Gothenburg Film Festival that opens in 2 weeks from now. And then they will also show the other 6, so the whole sequence will be there for people to see. He had a tough time in the beginning to get perhaps colleagues to understand why would he get a deal of 7 films, and also critics. But I think that he's really shown the ability with the media, with film, also being able to write tremendous scripts. Right. The film we just seen is, of course, sort of a chamber play with dramatic effects between various people, and that is an accomplishment, I think. Right. He also wrote the music, as you heard.
Well, no, exactly, and that's of course one of the interesting features of the film. If someone, how to put this, if someone did not want to have an interest in this film, one could hear the opening ballad, as it were, and sort of say, if in a certain sense the film doesn't get better than this ballad, we might be in trouble. But of course, one of the most fascinating features of the film is the way in which the music, the words, continue to come back, and you have this repetition and variation and comment by the action on what the ballad is proposing, and then the ballad's kind of response back. People use the music as a means of interpreting the action.
And that music, and that role of a singer, somewhat aged, someone with a background in the hippie era, is something that we've had a lot. We have several of those,
Right.
and some of their ballads are mean very much to us and have become very popular. But it's also, you think back and say, oh, this is one of those singers from the 60s and 70s.
Right.
So it plays a dramatic role more than just being a background music.
Well, absolutely, absolutely the case, and it also points to one of the for me, one of the interesting features of this film is that, in contrast, for example, to the hit film you talked about, that really captures a certain feeling of Swedish youth at this particular moment. This is a film that's dealing with two other generations. Is dealing with what we in the United States, of course, refer to as the baby boom generation, which can no longer claim youth. Being a grandparent frequently does that to people. And then to that generation that came of age immediately after World War II, and then they're passing, into the autumn in paradise. Whatever. But that is itself, I think, apart from Hobert's very distinguished handling of this as story, this is, from an American commercial point of view, this is a very unusual thing to take on. You're taking on, this is not a film pitched towards youth. It's pitched towards people who are looking in the other direction in time.
Which is unusual because the film audience in Sweden is basically between 20 and 30, or should I say 18, 40, something like that. I think, or I've seen that the film audience here in the United States, it's much older. You see them in the 50s and 60s and 70s, at least here in New York,
right.
Seeing film. And that is not the case back home, although this film would, of course, appeal to such an audience with the situation of the role of Sven Lindberg, the father
right.
in the film, with his special situation with his wife passing and so forth.
Well,
so it's a theme that would attract several generations.
I should point out to our viewers that this film has a double feature. One, it's part of the series, The Seven Deadly Sins, made by Hobert, but specifically, it is a sequel to an earlier film called Spring of Joy, Autumn in Paradise, Spring of Joy. And if our viewers were wondering why the subject of a vase left on a bus is an issue with the bus driver talking about this, we can let people know that's because that was one of the narrative or story engines of the first film, which chronicles the mourning process of the father figure after his wife has died and his inability to divest himself of the vase of her ashes. So these are characters in this particular film who are coming back from a situation. I should say in the earlier film, to just let people know, I don't think you have to have seen the earlier film to really appreciate what we've just seen. That's one of the reasons I didn't emphasize that in my introduction. But it is true that the hippie character is truly still within his hippie existence at the beginning of the other film. It's now the 90s, and he's still in a 70s haze, as we would say. So the fact that he has, settled with his wife, she is pregnant, is presumably that he has moved forward. And then we see the way in which the past still pulls and attracts, as we see through the affair with the neighbors, with his old childhood friend and neighbor's wife.
And both the father and son are in the process of taking a leap into another process of growing, the son then being a father and sort of stabilizing, buying the house, and the father entering into a new marriage or a new relationship. So it's a passing of time and generations. So it's very
no, and this is one of the many virtues of this film, is the way in which that is set up by this wonderful cross-cutting that takes place in the first 10 minutes or so, both of which are romantic pursuits both of which begin, I would claim, in a very kind of genre-based film style. We have this near fairy tale-like style of the older couple in the orchard. It almost seems to be out of a storybook of some kind. And then we have the pursuit on the train, which is almost, you know, Hitchcockian with noir tones. This is taking place at night, and this is exciting, but it's exciting not because of the opulence and the innocence of the orchard, but because of the dark, the danger. Is this something forbidden? You almost get, you know, if this was still the Cold War, you know, oh my goodness, is this the German spy and the Russian spy, you know?
And you don't know their relationship. You don't know how they know each other before. So it's sort of starting with a couple of question marks.
Absolutely the case, with two sets of actions that are parallel in terms of story because they are romantic pursuits, filmed in a different style, both of them, but neither of us giving us initially sufficient story information to know what's at stake other than the pursuit. And then, of course, we get the scene at the train station, which all of a sudden, all kinds of threads begin to pull together. Let's just talk a little bit about, not so much about geography, but where socially this film takes place in Sweden. Hobert is someone who is always filming in the same region of Sweden, as I take it?
It's a fascinating region, and he said in an interview that in that region you can find everything. I don't think you will find a desert, but you find forest and meadows and everything. Beautiful region in the south, and he lives down there too. And several other films have been shot there. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And then it's also the apple region. Not very strong, but it has, this is an interesting little piece. For the film, he needed to have this apple festival. He told the apple orchard, or the farmers there, let's make a festival. We pay for some of the arrangements. And he did, and then the festival has continued, drawing out 30,000 people every year, and Richard Hobert has been given the Tourist Bureau Prize of the region or something like that. So it's a social effect. But the setting is, in a way, very Swedish. The summer house, the summer cottage is important to the Swedes. They try to go up. This green wave of trying to move out from the city to the cottage, which was an element of these the 60, 70 generations. And the cottage there is also a symbol of handing over from one generation to the other. Should he sell it, and the son, should he take it over, and so forth. So he has fitted into a Swedish society very well. There's nothing that looks international. It's very, very basically Swedish in that film. And that comes back in many other Swedish films. If you compare with American film, for example, we have very few films that need elaborate settings. The special effects budget of Swedish films is non-existent. Possibly a fireworks at the end, but nothing else. There are no car chases. There are the action element, and perhaps this is what they've inherited from, if they've inherited anything from Bergman and Sjöman and some of the others, that the actual drama, the interplay, the relations between the people, whether it's a small chamber play or a larger play, that's the important thing. That is where the action takes place, the relation and the emotions between people, rather than elaborate settings and camera works and so forth.
Well, that also comes back to this notion of a national cinema. That is, of a cinema that is made with the notion that its primary audience is the people, is the people of that particular culture. And so where are you going to find those culturally specific things? You're going to find it, you know, in the stories of the people themselves. You know, you're going to find it in your actors who are speaking your language, not a second or a third language, and you're going to find it in the material settings that constitute the material culture, and it's a little bit hard to explain to people sometimes that you don't know how much you're embedded in your own material culture until it's absent. That the things, the nature of cups, or the kind of furniture, or the color schemes in houses, all of those things, an American may think, well, this is just the way it is, and then they go to the Caribbean, or they go to Europe, and they say, oh, people with the same income as we live differently, even though we have the same thing. So,
and this is the difficult thing, because things that we see in Swedish films, to me as a Swede, it looks natural. I can see whether it's accurate or it's exaggerated. But a Swede will look at American film. We are familiar with the American way of living. We grew up all the way from, whether it's Perry Mason or whatever it is. There are young Swedish people who have seen an American courtroom on television 100 times, but they've never been in a Swedish courtroom.
Right.
So it's very interesting to see this, how you see another film, that we're familiar with this side, but Americans or international audience may not logically be familiar with, this is the way it looks in Sweden or Denmark or Finland. And a filmmaker doesn't really think about that. He just makes his story, but it could add to the story things that he doesn't know. My Life as a Dog is such a case in the 1950s and the 50s, which to me was a very, very Swedish film. It made tremendous success here. And I said, how can they understand? This is something why would they laugh? How could they understand that joke? But it's surprising.
Well, no, that's part of, to use my cliche phrase, the magic of the movies, or more specifically, that it's a multimedia, that we receive so many different forms of information through the image, that we understand frequently things in movies that we didn't know. A friend of mine who recently is well traveled indeed, but had never been to the Mediterranean, came back and said, Fellini.
Of course.
No, and in a certain sense, I mean, she always knew that. That was not, but she said, but all of a sudden I walked into something that I'd been in many, many times before, but I didn't have that shock of experiential recognition.
Or they come to Stockholm at Christmas time and they think, oh, it's Fanny and Alexander by Bergman.
Exactly.
So this is what happens.
Right. We've only got a minute or so left. So what do you think, I'm not asking for a big prophecy, Claes, but what do you think are going to be some of the tendencies in the next couple of years, as we move into the 21st century for Swedish film? We're going to hear more from Hobert and these other wave of filmmakers?
Yes, because I think there is a basis laid now, more production companies, and also a Nordic film fund. The Scandinavian countries work together with a fund, so that's a basis for production. I think there are a number of directors, as we've spoken about, they are now doing the first, second, or third, and they will continue. They've now tried and made mistakes, and some of them have been good, and some may not have been good. So we'll have a number of films that will make good films. They've also, many of them have made documentaries. Sometimes portraits of people, international portraits. I think that will continue. Some of them also made children's film.
Okay.
And that's a strong tradition we have through the Astrid Lindgren and Maria Gripe stories that have all been on film. So I think they will continue with that, and that will eventually reach a larger audience as well, because children's film can be very international. Absolutely. So I'm very hopeful. I think the situation for Swedish film now is better than it's been in many, many years.
Good. Well, I don't know where we can go after a statement like that. And by happy coincidence, we are at the end of our time. If you'd like more information about City Cinematheque, please drop us a line. Drop it to City Cinematheque, City University Television, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016. Let me give you that information again. Drop us a line and drop it to City Cinematheque, City University Television, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016. Claes, it's a pleasure having you here. I'm very happy that we have been able to explain to our audience what is happening in the dynamic northern region of Europe. I look forward to opportunities to show more Swedish as
Hope
well
so.
as other Scandinavian films here, and to have you back again, okay?
Very good. Thank you very much.
Great. And I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and I hope you tune in once again to City Cinematheque. Goodbye for now. The preceding episode of City Cinematheque was made possible, in part, by support from the American Scandinavian Foundation and the Consulate General of Sweden in New York.